Committee will come to order. I'd like to welcome our witnesses today as the committee examines military cyber operations. I note that just about exactly 2 months ago, President Obama confirmed for the first time that the U.S. is conducting cyber operations against ISIS. And as the leadership of the Department of Defense was discussing this, they said it was the first time that Cyber Command has been given the guidance to go after ISIS. Just like we have an air campaign, we want to have a cyber campaign. And some of the press went on to discuss that Secretary Carter was pushing for U.S. Cyber Command to have greater freedom to launch attacks and to address tactical cyber threats against ISIS. I know this committee remains committed to ensuring that the Department of Defense's capabilities to fight and win the country's wars and to be prepared and ready to execute those missions remain on solid footing regardless of which domain we are talking about, including the cyber domain. The Department has been developing the organization's capabilities and personnel needed to operate in cyber since at least 2010. Billions of dollars have been spent, and yet the perception, and y'all can disagree with this if you think I'm wrong, the perception is the threat is still multiplying faster and growing faster than at least our laws and regulations, policies, rules of engagement are developing. Still a fundamental question: what is the role of the military to protect civilian infrastructure in the United States against cyber attack? I do not suggest we're going to get the definitive answer to all of those questions today, but I think that it is important that we discuss not only those, but the tactical use of cyber, which the President talked about and which the leadership of the Department has talked about. It's a significant change just in the past few months. So we'll look forward to hearing from our witnesses about those and other topics, but first I'd yield to the distinguished ranking member for any comments he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I agree with your comments about both the complexity and the importance of cyber. And I think the most interesting thing that I'd like to get out of this hearing is sort of how is the organization coming together? Because I think that's the major challenge. It's been quite a few years now since we've recognized the importance of cyber in different aspects of our national security apparatus, in addition to different aspects of the Department of Defense, have attempted to address that problem. So we got a lot of people working on it. How coordinated are they? I think that's the great challenge, is making sure that we're getting the most out of the resources that we're putting into this, because it is a constantly evolving threat, and it threatens everything. Every aspect. You know, the least little device can be an entry point to a cyber attack. So how do you get a comprehensive look at making sure that you control's a bit of an optimistic statement, have some measure of understanding of where the threats are and how best to address them. So how the various branches of the military and our broader cyber vulnerabilities, as the chairman mentioned, a lot of those vulnerabilities exist in the private sector. On the Defense Committee, we've had defense contractors who have been hacked before that have created problems. So how do we comprehensively address this incredibly complex and ever-evolving problem? I think that's the great challenge. And I will say that I very much approved of what Secretary Carter did, where he had the, I forget what he called it, but basically invited hackers to try to find their way in and learn from that. I think that was one of the best, most cost-effective ways to do it, instead of doing some contract out to some company and going through a complex process. Just take those people out there who are really good at this and say, come at us, show us our vulnerabilities. I thought that was a very wise way to learn a lot in a cost-effective manner. But again, the real challenge is having a comprehensive approach to such an ever-evolving and challenging problem. And then, as the chairman mentioned, the legalities of it in terms of, are our laws and regulations keeping up with it, to make sure that you in the executive branch have the authorities that you need to best protect us, and in some cases use cyber as an offensive weapon where necessary. That those legal questions are also very complicated and ones that we would like to be helpful with if we can. With that, I'll yield back and look forward to testimony.
I thank the gentleman. I also want to mention that, of course, on the front lines for oversight of this issue, I very much appreciate the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee, Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Langevin, who work in this area day to day. I think it is also important, though, for all members to look at these larger cyber issues, which is why we're doing this hearing with the full committee today. Let me welcome our witnesses, Mr. Thomas Akin, Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Homeland Defense and Global Security, Lieutenant General Kevin McLaughlin, Deputy Commander, U.S. Cyber Command, and Brigadier General Charles Moore, Deputy Director, Global Operations with the Joint Staff. Without objection, any written material you'd like to submit will be included in the record. Thank you all again for being here. Mr. Atkin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Smith, and members of the committee. I am pleased to testify today along with my colleagues, Lieutenant General Kevin McLaughlin and Brigadier General Tuna Moore, on the Department's efforts in cyberspace and how we are improving America's cybersecurity posture. It is an honor to represent the Department, and I am proud of the progress we have made in this challenging domain. The closed hearing this afternoon will go into greater detail on some of the challenges that we face in cyberspace and the Department's efforts to address those challenges. But I wanted to highlight just a few things here this morning. First, the threat. Today, we face a diverse and persistent threat in cyberspace from state and non-state actors that cannot be defeated through the efforts of any single organization. Our increasingly wired and interconnected world has brought prosperity and economic gain to the United States. However, our dependence on these systems also leaves us vulnerable, and the cyber threats are increasing and evolving, posing greater risk to the network and systems of the Department of Defense and other departments and agencies, our national critical infrastructure, and other U.S. companies and interests. While DoD maintains and uses robust and unique cyber capabilities to defend our networks and the nation, that alone is not sufficient. Securing our systems and networks is everyone's responsibility, from the commander down to the individual, and this requires a culture of cybersecurity. More broadly, preventing cyber attacks of significant consequence against the U.S. homeland requires a whole-of-government and a whole-of-nation approach. To that end, DoD works in close collaboration with other federal departments, our allies, and the private sector to improve our nation's cybersecurity posture and to ensure that DoD has the ability to operate in any environment at any time. Since DoD's cyber strategy was signed in April 2015 by Secretary Carter, the Department has devoted considerable resources to implementing the goals and objectives outlined within the document. When Secretary signed the document, he directed the Department to focus its efforts on three primary missions in cyberspace. One, defend the Department of Defense information networks to assure our DoD missions. Two, defend the United States against cyber attacks of significant consequence. And three, provide full-spectrum cyber options to support contingency plans and military operations. Another key part of our strategy is deterrence. DoD is supporting a comprehensive whole-of-government cyber deterrence strategy to deter attacks on the U.S. and our interests. This strategy depends on the totality of U.S. actions, to include declaratory policy, overall defensive posture, effective response procedures, indications and warning capabilities, and the resiliency of U.S. networks and systems. I am proud to say that the Department has made important strides in implementing DoD's cyber strategy since it was signed in April 2015. My colleagues and I look forward to going into greater detail on our strategy and the state of the cyber mission forces as the hearing proceeds, as well as to discuss how our thinking and incorporation of cyber into operations is evolving. The Department is committed to the security and resiliency of our networks and to defending the U.S. homeland and our U.S. interests from attacks of significant consequence that may occur in cyberspace. I look forward to working with this committee and the Congress to ensure that the Department has the necessary capabilities to keep our country safe and our forces strong. I thank you for your support in these efforts, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
General McLaughlin.
Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Smith, and distinguished members of the committee, I'm honored to appear before you today representing the men and women of U.S. Cyber Command. It's my pleasure to do so alongside Assistant Secretary Thomas Akin and Brigadier General Charles Moore, two gentlemen that keenly recognize the opportunities and challenges the department faces in the cyber domain. I'd like to focus my opening remarks on U.S. Cyber Command's ongoing efforts to build capability and capacity in the Cyber Mission Force. The Cyber Mission Force, with unique teams designed to defend DoD information networks, support combatant commander missions, or defend the nation's critical infrastructure, gives U.S. Cyber Command and the Department a means to apply military capability at scale in cyberspace. We recognize that success in accomplishing our assigned missions is dependent on three factors: the quality of our people, the effectiveness of their capabilities, and the proficiency that our people bring to bear in employing these capabilities. U.S. Cyber Command's manpower reflects a true total force effort encompassing a robust active component, along with both National Guard and Reserve forces being fully integrated at all echelons, from the highest levels at our headquarters down to our tactical forces that are represented in the Cyber Mission Force. As of June 10th of this year, out of a target total of 133 teams that will be part of the Cyber Mission Force, we have 46 teams that are at fully operational capable status and 59 that are at initial operating capability status. These teams currently comprise 4,684 total people that we will build to eventually 6,187 when we finish. It is important to note that even teams that are not fully operational are already contributing to our cyberspace efforts as the command operates on a full-time and global basis. The nation and every combatant commander can now call on Cyber Mission Force teams to bring cyberspace effects in support of their operations. Such work occurs daily, for instance, in the fight against ISIL, where our teams are conducting cyberspace operations in support of U.S. Central Command's ongoing efforts to degrade, dismantle, and ultimately defeat ISIL. Training the force to be prepared for its varied missions is imperative. U.S. Cyber Command's annual Cyber Guard exercise, which concluded last Friday, provides realistic training in which federal, state, industry, and international partners can use their skills against a determined opposition force. The response to Cyber Guard from our public and private partners has been tremendous. Dozens of critical infrastructure companies have expressed interest in participating in it. Exercises like Cyber Guard allow senior policymakers to observe the types of issues we see in real cyber attacks, and helps us generate a playbook that should save the federal government precious time and stress in responding. In this year's exercise, U.S. Cyber Command expects to certify teams, ensuring they have the requisite training and skills to make an immediate impact in today's fight. Our command prides itself in being a learning organization. Exercises like Cyber Guard and our other premier exercise, Cyber Flag, which is ongoing at this moment, are key lessons learned opportunities for us. We also look at everything that we're learning in the growing set of real-world operations and collaboration from the private sector, academia, and partner nations to provide valuable insights to the command and allow our teams to develop and implement new tactics, techniques, and procedures. Although our people are undoubtedly our most important asset, I'd be remiss not to highlight the importance of specialized tools, infrastructure, and capabilities that the Cyber Mission Force needs to execute its missions. Ongoing efforts to develop tools such as the persistent training environment, the unified platform, cyber situational awareness, and the joint information environment must continue to be resourced. These capabilities are critical in ensuring our cyber warriors are equipped to counter sophisticated and dynamic adversaries. The accelerated pace of technology innovation and our adversaries' changing tactics in cyberspace require well-trained, well-resourced, and agile force to perform all three of the critical missions we perform in support of the Department and the nation. With that, thank you again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for inviting me to appear before you today. I assure you that U.S. Cyber Command is committed to the mission of ensuring the Department of Defense mission assurance, deterring or defeating strategic threats to our interest and infrastructure, and achieving Joint Force Commander objectives. The growing capabilities and capacity of the Cyber Mission Force is adding to our ability to perform this mission. The U.S. Cyber Command team appreciates the support of this committee that it has shown and looks forward to our continuing partnership with Congress to address the challenges and opportunities in cyberspace, and I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. General Moore?
Thank you. Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Smith, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Joint Staff in regards to the Department of Defense's efforts in the cyber domain. As all of you are aware, the inherent global nature of cyberspace operations and cyberspace threats causes and creates numerous challenges for the Department of Defense. Additionally, our warfighting capabilities are increasingly reliant on the cyber domain, and it is integral to the advantages we enjoy in everything from our high-tech weapons and communication systems to our ability to rapidly deploy forces around the globe. Furthermore, trying to keep up with the rate at which technology is advancing in this rapidly changing environment is extremely challenging. It is important to note that while our adversaries and potential adversaries continue to increase their capabilities, they also share these challenges. All of that said, the Department of Defense is making significant progress, including the continued build of our cyber mission force, challenging our adversaries' ability to operate freely in cyberspace, and continue to improve more effectively our ability to defend our networks, information, weapon systems from malicious cyberspace actors. In regards to building our cyber capabilities, U.S. STRATCOM and U.S. CYBERCOM continue to make great strides in standing up our cyber mission forces. These forces are arranged in teams with the objectives to support combatant command requirements, to defend the nation against cyber attack, and to protect our Department of Defense information networks, information, and weapon systems. While significant progress in all these areas has been made in the last year, significant challenges do remain, to include equipping the force, establishing a persistent training environment that is responsive to the many layers of required training, recruiting and retaining a professional cyber force, and finalizing the command and control structure for the cyber mission force. From an operational perspective, CYBERCOM continues to make great progress as we continue to see significant results from our counter-ISIL strategy. In this area, CYBERCOM has not only challenged ISIL, as the President and the Secretary of Defense have publicly stated, but they have also built on our lessons learned to date, establishing a solid foundation upon which to expand the scale and effectiveness of our operations. From a broader strategic view, our adversaries, who are always looking for something that can provide them an asymmetric advantage, find cyberspace appealing due to the low barriers to entry and the perceived difficulty of attribution. Because of these threats from both state and non-state actors, we work vigorously to harden our networks and weapon systems while educating the total force to create a climate of constant vigilance. To strengthen the whole of government effort to protect U.S. interests, particularly U.S. critical infrastructure, the Department of Defense routinely engages and works with our interagency partners. The Department also regularly engages with our international partners, and there is tremendous interest to expand those cyber relationships. Finally, as our capabilities continue to grow, we continually engage all of the combatant commands to ensure cyber-enabled effects are being considered for incorporation into their planning processes and to benefit all current and future operations. While it is well known that we are actively engaged in cyberspace against ISIL, we also recognize that there are other threats in cyberspace that must be planned for and addressed. The Joint Staff is working closely with U.S. CYBERCOM to continue to bring cyber-related options to the table for consideration to support all of our global operations. As I mentioned, the cyber domain is constantly changing, and we see malicious cyber actors rapidly developing new capabilities at a very high rate. The Joint Staff continues to work closely with CYBERCOM, the combatant commands, OSD, and our interagency and international partners to secure our networks, our information, weapon systems, and to support combatant command objectives while we defend the nation against malicious cyberspace activities. Thank you again for the opportunity to appear today. I look forward to answering any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Let me just take a second and remind members that we will have our quarterly cyber update this afternoon at 2 o'clock in this room. Be classified, of course, but we will be able to get into greater detail on classified matters at that time. Mr. Akin, the Cyber Command achieved full operational capability in October 2010. So we're nearly 6 years down the road. Isn't it time for CYBERCOM to stand on its own as a combatant command?
I think the short answer to that is yes. We are continuing to look at that within the department. The Secretary has been evaluating whether to stand up cyber or recommend to the president to stand up CYBERCOM as its own unified command. So we are continuing to look at it, but I think we are getting close to a decision, and we will be getting something to the president here in the near future.
Well, we're trying to help you along because Section 911 of the Defense Authorization Bill requires that that be done. And I note that Admiral Rogers has testified that becoming a combatant command would allow CYBERCOM to be faster, which would generate better mission outcomes. I have yet to hear a reason not to do it. And so it seems to me that we shouldn't stew around about this too long, because the goal is better outcomes, and if that's what the result is, we ought to be able to agree and get that done without a lot of delay. General McLaughlin, let me ask you. We talked about the tactical use of cyber that's been publicly talked about by the President, Secretary, Deputy Secretary. We obviously cannot get into the details of that in this forum, but are there, what would you say are kind of the broader challenges that have been encountered so far? General Moore mentioned lessons learned. Kind of at a upper policy level, what have we learned so far with what we've been doing against ISIS?
So I think what we've learned is, as we described to you the cyber mission force that is being built right now, we've learned that the fundamental building blocks of the forces that are actually supporting combatant commands, as we stated in our mission, one major focus is bringing cyber effects to support our combatant commanders, and the war on ISIL is the first at scale opportunity to do that in support of U.S. Central Command. So the first thing we have learned is that it's reinforced that the way we're creating our teams, the expertise within those teams, and how they plug into the to our command and control planning processes, including to the supported command, is working. The broader challenges we have is this team is still a young force. As we mentioned, we have quite a few of them that are at initial operating capability, and so in many cases, this is the first actual live opportunity for these forces to conduct that type of mission. And so the types of lessons we've learned have been a number of just practical lessons about improving the ability for us to do that routinely and at scale. The reason the persistent training environment is so important is to give teams like those that are supporting the war in ISIL more realistic opportunities to do their work and train in realistic environments prior to actually doing it in combat. So we sort of knew that intuitively, and the actual operations have borne out how important that capability would be. We've learned how quickly that the department in general needs to operate in terms of if there are any policy or anything that needs to be done to support sharing, for example, with partners, and that has happened routinely. So the OSD staff, for example, sits in our twice-a-week update that we do in this area specifically to want to know, is there anything at all that is needed in order to make these operations more effective. We've learned how important that broader team is. Some people might not realize how closely coupled that we are from that perspective. I think really the last is maturity, continuing to do this. So we've learned more in the last several months since it's been announced publicly that we're supporting this. It's given us the opportunity to learn and mature and kind of plow back in lessons learned in a real circumstance that it might have taken us several years to learn some of the things that we're learning, but it's the nature of military operations. And in summary, I would just say I think we believe that we're on course. The fundamental tenets of what we're doing are sound, and our job is to continue to expand capability and capacity against this enemy. And we will talk with you about it and give you some practical examples of that in the closed session later this afternoon.
General Moore, do you have anything to add on lessons learned or what you see from a joint staff perspective?
No, sir. I think most of those that I would add to were touched on by General McLaughlin. I would piggyback on and say the speed of operations and how we can increase the speed of those operations, especially at the operational and tactical level, something we're very much focused on and is going to be critical to continue to support overall combat operations. We've also applied the lessons, though, that we've learned from attacks on our own infrastructure and how to better protect ourselves and how better to train our people to defend against that.
Okay. Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following up on the raising it to a combatant command level, which we'd like to see happen. What are the challenges? What are the steps that you see necessary, Mr. Akin, to get to that point where you're ready to make that move?
I think, sir, our biggest challenges are going to be resources, making sure that CYBERCOM has all the right resources as they build out the cyber mission force, as we continue to build out the PTE that General McLaughlin has already mentioned, the unified platform, et cetera, to make sure that they can stand alone and operate as a Title X military force in support of the combatant commanders. I think that's going to be the key. Not that we can't do it. It's just a matter of making sure that we're doing it in a sequenced way to make sure that we don't hamper or hurt any operations that we have ongoing and that we continue to gain advantages and do better when we're conducting these operations. So it's, I don't think there's any one specific thing that was stopping us. It's more about how we make sure it's sequenced to get to the right mission.
And what are the coordination challenges there? Now, there is obviously, we've already coordinated into a central cyber structure. It just hasn't been given a combatant command status. As you look throughout DoD, obviously there's a lot of people working on cyber. How do you sort of round all of that up and get it under one unified combatant command? What are the challenges going to be into pulling in those pieces and working with them?
Well, I think part of the challenge is going to be how we just work internally within the department, and I think we have a good way ahead under the Principal Cyber Advisor, which I am, as well as my role as the Acting Assistant Secretary for Policy. So we work it from both those angles within the department internally. Under the Joint Staff and as a combatant commander, they work very closely with the other combatant commands to make sure that all the operations are integrated and coordinated. And then we, in policy, also work across the interagency and across the intelligence community to make sure the operations are coordinated and the sequence of activities, whether it's the application of resources or training or other operations, are coordinated.
And what, if any, role does the NSC play in your cyber operations? This is a subject that's come up in our hearings, you know, the increasing role of the NSC over the top of, in some cases, the Department of Defense. How are they involved in that? If they're involved, how well do you coordinate and balance what the NSC might be doing on cyber versus what DoD is doing on cyber?
Well, the NSC is obviously an integral part of the whole government solution and the whole nation solution for any of our activities. And so we keep them advised of the operations that we have ongoing through the interagency process. And we also, when necessary, we coordinate and get the President's permission to conduct operations when his permission is required.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we may want to pursue that a little further. Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for citing the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee. I'm very grateful to be chairman of the committee with extraordinary staff that have worked with everyone here. Pete Villano, Kevin Gates, Katie Sutton, Nevi Shadler, and Lindsay Kavanaugh. And it's also been a remarkable exercise of bipartisanship working with Jim Langevin. And I'm particularly grateful there are subcommittee members here who have been so important. And Elise Stefanik has just been a superstar coming to every meeting. And I'm just so grateful for our other members who are here, Doug Lamburn, Sheriff Rich Nugent, Mo Brooks, Vice Chairman Trent Franks, Duncan Hunter. But it's just been terrific to work with each of you. It's been so meaningful on cyber operations, what can be done, but the dangers to the American people, and you're trying to be proactive, and we appreciate that very much. In fact, General McLaughlin, what are we doing to make better use of coalition forces and capabilities in the planning and execution of our cyberspace operations? How are we aligning our policies, doctrines, and capabilities with our NATO allies?
Mr. Wilson, thank you. Before I answer your question, we also appreciate the great support from the subcommittee and agree that your staff, the staff supporting that has been outstanding, and they're very knowledgeable and helpful as we work together. The ability to integrate our coalition partners into our operations at U.S. Cyber Command is critical. We have a broad latitude and authorities that have been granted to us for that partnership. They are actually primarily today with our Five Eyes partners. We are working and do communicate with NATO, but right now our focus has been our Five Eyes partners, as well as there are some other partners that are really interested in how they actually create the capacity to have their versions of Cyber Command and to do military cyber operations in countries that are still, I think, at the verge of trying to decide whether they are going to take the same steps that we've taken. The types of practical areas where we work today with our coalition partners, some members of the committee, Congressman Langevin and the staff, were just down at Cyber Guard down at Suffolk last week, and we have Cyber Flag occurring now. We have coalition partners in those sessions, training with our people, learning lessons, creating tactics, techniques, and procedures jointly, and actually practically identifying and overcoming any challenges that limit our ability to work together. There are key areas where we are doing development of capability together instead of each of us spending the same money to accomplish a certain task. For our close partners, there might be times where we'll share burden or do work like that together. And then when directed and when authorized, if we have operations where we have a partner that can bring a capability or capacity, we are operating with those partners with shared objectives operationally and conducting operations in a way that each of our national capabilities are being used to accomplish objectives that we share. So I think it's a robust environment right now. It's growing. I think you'll see more and more countries want to be part of this partnership, and we will embrace them as they show interest and as they have the capability to partner.
And we have our long-term allies of NATO, but it's exciting. New members such as Bulgaria, Slovakia visited different IT centers there, and so very talented people who will be very helpful. Additionally, General, how good is the current training exercise and certification process in replicating the real-world challenges using cyber capabilities in tactical operations? Cyber Command has recently completed a Cyber Guard 16 exercise. Are there any lessons or highlights from that exercise can be applied to our ability to effectively apply cyber capabilities to tactical operations?
Sir, that's also a great question. So I would really answer you in two ways. We have the ability, Cyber Guard is a great example, to do high-fidelity, highly realistic training where our teams, our tactical forces, can be immersed in a simulated environment that looks real to them and have to perform their duties with an actual opposing force, another group of people that are acting as if they're the enemy. And they have to demonstrate that they have the ability to do their job in that realistic environment. So we can do that, and we are doing it down in the Suffolk area right now. The issue that we have is we cannot do that at scale. And so we have the program we mentioned in my opening comments, the persistent training environment. That is a focused effort in the Department of Defense to allow us to actually do that type of training routinely, every week, every day, so that the men and women that are on our teams have the ability to do the level of training that we're doing down in Suffolk right now. We only do that a few times a year. So our job is to do that consistently all the time like we do in every other domain.
My time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, Chairman, I want to thank you for your support and your interest in cyber as you had continued on when you were chairman of the Emerging Threats Capability Subcommittee, and I appreciate the work you're doing now at the full committee level along with the ranking member, Mr. Smith. And I agree with my chairman on the subcommittee now, Mr. Wilson, that it's been an exercise in bipartisanship, and deeply appreciate the work of the staff. Secretary Akin, I want to thank you for your testimony today, along with you, General McLaughlin, and General Moore. Thank you for what you're doing on cyber, and again, being here today. General McLaughlin and General Moore, as we've discussed this morning, the Cyber Guard Homeland Defense training exercise just concluded. I was very pleased to be able to attend that exercise. I very much enjoyed being able to witness the exercise take place in person. I was very impressed with what I saw, and I wanted to thank you all for being such great hosts for that exercise. Chairman Wilson had asked, not surprisingly, we're on the same page. I wanted to know what your takeaways were from the exercise and the highest level. So anything else you want to elaborate on lessons learned from the exercise, feel free. But I also would like to know, beyond that, what lessons have been learned with respect to the cyber mission forces executing operations in a geographic combatant commander's area of responsibility as they pertain to each mission, and our roles and responsibilities of involved entities being refined and solidified, as well as command and control of CMF.
Congressman, let me just take both of your questions. I think on the first question about high-level lessons learned that we have seen coming out of this year's Cyber Guard, while the full report will be written in the next few weeks, we do have some initial, I think, broad insights that come from it. One is an increasing understanding of how many of the other partners, so that, as you mentioned, that is a whole of government and international exercise that simulates some attack of significant consequence that occurred, with outside of the DoD networks. What's really been interesting in our lesson is how many players, both within our government, within industry, and within, and I mean broadly beyond DoD, within our government and our coalition partners, are coming to this exercise. It continues to grow because it's an opportunity to tease out not only practical technical ways for our teams to defend and respond, but those complex challenges about how different parts of the federal government coordinate in response, and how does that work? How do we work with industry? And you know better than most the complex issues associated with government forces actually connecting with industry, cyber terrain, and how we should do that most appropriately and most effectively, and then how we do that at scale with our partners. So that continues to be a key lesson for us, is the scale of people that want to participate. And every time we think we've reached the outer limits of who ought to be there, we realize there are more players that can or ought to come. And then the last thing, just to really reinforce the question, I think, from Mr. Wilson, and that is the need to be able to train at the level. The men and women that are down at CyberGuard are asking us, say, we really would like to have this capability routinely. This is great training. It's the best. Most of them say it's the best they've ever had, and our goal is to let them do the best all the time. I think your question regarding what have we learned in terms of how, in our mission of supporting combatant commanders, are there broad lessons that we learned, and are we adapting and being innovative? When we started, we built the Cyber Mission Force in our initial command and control models. We just started with what we thought would work. And what's been very interesting, and I think a positive step, was the department, and often led by General Moore's team down on the Joint Staff, has continued to lead and ask, how do we refine and change and adapt our command and control processes? And we've made a number of adjustments in the last 18 months. We'll talk this afternoon. We've made changes in how we command and control and focus our forces just in the counter-ISIL operations. So we really are learning and changing a lot. There's no one saying that's the way we've always done it, because the way we've always done it's only been about 2 or 3 years. So we are changing as we need to. The one thing I think is a key just tenet that all of us need to understand, and we're seeing this play out in support to CENTCOM. Cyber capabilities aren't just there to solve cyber problems. There are adversaries that present themselves in a variety of ways that we could hold at risk. They might have a cyber capability that I will use some other tool or capability to counter, and they may have a non-cyber capability that we're going to use a cyber tool to counter. And so that is one thing I think is the whole department's learning, is that you don't pigeonhole cyber capabilities against cyber problems, is that we integrate broadly with CENTCOM, we integrate broadly with combatant commands, and we bring what's unique that we can offer to their mission as opposed to defining problems only as cyber only. I think that has been a key lesson for everybody, and I think it's a powerful one for the department.
Thank you, General. Thank you and your team for the work you're doing. And I was very impressed with what I said when I saw the Cyber Guard exercise, and I agree. The training has got to be a key part of us doing this going forward, and seeing that persistent training environment be maximized and supported in a very robust way. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Lamborn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your service to our country in various capacities. And I'm going to build off of what Representative Langevin was just asking. This month, in a press interview, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that a major cyber attack could trigger a collective response by NATO, including a response using conventional weapons. Now, I know that's NATO, not the homeland. But in this fast-evolving field, what can you tell us? What are you in a position to state publicly are the evolving rules of engagement where something would trigger a cyber response from us or a kinetic response from us?
So as I've said before, it's a whole of government response. So a cyber response or a cyber attack would not necessarily mean we have to have a cyber response back to that. And each of those actions would be evaluated on a case-by-case basis by the entire interagency and the government. So we would look at any cyber attack, whether it's against a combatant commander overseas or here in the homeland, on a case-by-case basis, then determine what the significance of it was, and then we would use a whole-of-government approach, whether it's a diplomatic means, economic means, law enforcement, or military action to respond to that.
Anything to add to that, Generals?
Well, sir, I will say for our mission that, as General Moore mentioned, our job one is defending the DoD information network. That is ongoing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have all the authorities that we need today and are growing the forces. So any threat that manifests itself, and these are short of attacks, formal attacks or wars, but they occur all the time. And so the authorities we need within that domain, which is our main defensive mission set, we have those authorities, and we spend a great deal of our time day to day managing and responding to a breadth of those activities. In our closed session later today, we'll give you some insights into the scale of just the daily size of and scope of what that looks like, and then a specific example of an operation that we've conducted recently against a very specific threat, so that you can see that at a little bit more full.
Okay, well, thank you. That's reassuring to me, and I'm sure it's reassuring to everyone who might be listening. And changing gears, before my time is up, in Israel, they are doing more with collaborating with the private sector and consolidating everything that they're doing into one location for synergy. What do you see as the possibility or the future of collaborating with the private sector here in the U.S. with places like Silicon Valley, Seattle, et cetera, to harness the public sector creativity and expertise in this area? What do you see as the future of that?
So I would say in that regards, the future is here. We are integrated in with the private sector, I think, well, and we're going to continue to grow that, whether it's through the Defense Innovation Unit experimental out in Silicon Valley that Secretary Carter stood up, how we leverage the skills that the National Guard and Reserve forces bring from their private sector jobs, and we leverage those skills as integrating those folks into the cyber mission force, or continuing to work with the private sector in response to cyber attacks through exercises such as Cyber Guard. So we're already working with the private sector pretty well, I think. We're going to get better at that, and we're leveraging the skills of the National Guard and Reserve folks as part of the cyber mission force.
But you don't see anything in the works like what Israel did, for instance, where there would be an actual consolidation into one location. That is a much smaller country, obviously.
I would say that I don't see that, no, sir. I think there's We have good coordination and collaboration through the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, Department of Justice, as well as the other sector-specific agencies, Commerce, Treasury, et cetera, with their sectors. But I don't see us consolidating all those activities into one location.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Ms. Gabbard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, good morning. I'd like to ask you about defense support to civil authorities. In particular, I think the vulnerabilities and the concern about some type of domestic cyber attack on critical infrastructure that would threaten public safety. So I'm wondering if you can talk about that, but also specifically answer whether or not the DoD and the National Guard would assist in responding to that type of attack, as well as what actions are being taken to eliminate those vulnerabilities and to make it so these types of attacks are not possible.
And that's a great question and a great challenge for our country, is how we protect our critical infrastructure. We work very, very closely with the Department of Homeland Security, who's primarily interacting with the critical infrastructure and have that responsibility to not only provide them with information regarding threats, but to help define how would we respond as a nation to an attack on the critical infrastructure. Where DoD gets involved is an attack of significant consequence. We have the responsibility to defend against an attack of significant consequence.
How do you define significant consequence?
That would be determined by whether loss of life, physical damage, economic impact, or how it might impact our foreign policy. So those are some of the factors that we would evaluate of an attack of significant consequence.
So
but
could I just ask a follow-up to that?
Yes,
As
ma'am.
you define loss of life, if there was an attack on an electrical grid, caused a major power outage, hospitals no longer able to care for people, and loss of life in that respect, would that fall under that definition?
I'd have to say I'm not sure I could answer a hypothetical like that. I think that the factors of the impact would certainly be evaluated, determined. What I would say is, regardless of whether it's an attack of significant consequence or not, the Department of Homeland Security would respond, and if they needed assistance from the Department of Defense, they would ask for that assistance, and we would respond with assistance through the Department of Homeland Security to help that critical infrastructure. Part of that occurred during CyberGuard, where we exercised that capability, a request for assistance from the department, and we responded. So the other piece of that is the National Guard, and they have cyber mission capability. They are being trained to the same capabilities as the rest of the Title X force, and they can respond under their own state authorities. We recently completed the Coordinate, Train, Advise, and Assist policy guidance within the department to allow National Guard troops to use Department of Defense resources to respond to a cyber event under state authority. And we're continuing to work other policies. I just recently set up a meeting to work with all the different combatant commands, NORTHCOM, PACOM, Cyber Command, Joint Staff, and our Office of General Counsel to determine exactly how we're going to set up our defense support of civil authorities more holistically. The policy's been in process for a period of time, and I want to make sure we have senior leadership attention on it very directly.
Thank you. I think this is something that obviously we're going to have to continue to discuss, and understanding the differences of whether a state or non-state actor were to come and launch a traditional type of military attack on critical infrastructure versus a cyber attack, how the DoD is involved or not in those situations. You know, given the types of attacks that we are already seeing from both state and non-state actors in the cyber world, having clearly defined roles and responsibilities between DoD and DHS, I think, is critically important. Thank you.
I agree. Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for testifying today and for your leadership on this issue. I want to focus my questions for the full panel on the evolution of the cyber threat and how we maintain the edge on a 21st century battlefield. The news, as you know, this past year has been filled with stories about the evolving strategic threats in the cyber realm from near-peer adversaries like Russia and destabilizing threats from both state and non-state actors within the Middle East. Just this week, I read an article that CNN reported that ISIS has been able to collect information on 77 U.S. and NATO Air Force facilities around the world. In March, at a hearing on this subject, I asked Admiral Rogers how confident he was moving forward that our cyber capabilities are robust enough to face the threats of the future on multiple fronts. Can you speak specifically to your concerns about adversarial cyber capabilities and your assessment of our own capabilities in comparison moving forward? And then the second part of my question is, given the unique challenge of prosecuting simultaneous cyber threats from multiple adversaries, where do you feel the cyber community is assuming risk for readiness?
So, ma'am, so within this hearing, I can address that and would also be glad to get into the specific on the threat side when we are in the closed session. But broadly, you stated it correctly. The threat today is diverse. It certainly is represented not only by large nation states that are very, very capable to organizations like ISIL or criminal or hacker organizations. The barrier to entry is not that high. And the ability to innovate and use technology to continue to evolve is actually there. We, on the Cyber Command side, I think the key thing that we think is important is focused on people and technology. I'll do technology first. The ability to have the tools and the capability and sort of an integrated suite, a defense in depth approach across our whole enterprise, we think is proving to be very effective, and the ability to bring new technology. That's one of the reasons the connection to Silicon Valley and other places is so important, is we don't field something like a cyber capability that we'll use for a decade or a few decades. We're using we want the latest capability, and as soon as it's not the latest, we would like to have the next set of technology. So those tools and capabilities that are throughout the depth of our network are critical. The most important part, though, are our people. The reason we've talked about the persistent training environment, but we haven't really talked about even the foundational training that goes into the cyber mission force. And some people ask, why does it take a few years to take an initial session and get them to that level? Is that we're training all of our people to a very, very high standard, a joint standard across the force. Because in our mind, in our view, it's in the minds of our people that are going to allow them to keep up technologically with what the threat's doing. We're not just training our folks to operate equipment. We're training them to understand the domain, the foundational technologies, the advanced technologies, and in some cases, they're adapting the technology that they have right there at their fingertips in real time to counter our adversary or to develop tools to do that. So I think that's the most important part for us to stay ahead is making sure that we invest in the people and that they have those types of skills.
And on the multiple fronts portion of the question, given the fact that there are multiple cyber threats, whether you consider a near-peer adversary like Russia or non-state actors in the Middle East, where do you feel the cyber community is assuming risk to readiness?
Well, I think the way I'm going to answer your first question is if I'm thinking about broadly, assuming risk to military force readiness broadly. Cyber is a thread through everything that we do, our platforms, our networks, our own critical infrastructure within DoD. And we can't defend everything all the time at the same level. And so the way that we've approached that, and to some degrees broadly with the department, this is not a decision Cyber Command on its own makes, but we're given a set of priorities of the most important combat and military capabilities that need to be hardened and defended, and where mission assurance is most critical if they were to be attacked across a broad front. And so we don't think about doing that against one threat. We sort of prioritize the most important things against the most important threats. And those are the things we think have to be defended at the highest level. And we would accept risk if there was an area that was either not as important or something we felt was lower down the priority, because you just can't defend all of it to 100% all the time.
Thank you. Do other witnesses would you like to add anything?
On the risk measurement, I would say that we evaluate the critical infrastructure that's required for the department using our mission assurance strategy and our cyber strategy combined to identify those most critical elements of the infrastructure that we need to protect, and then we evaluate and prioritize those pieces. And we are not only protecting them from physical damage, but now we're also mapping out the key cyber terrain to understand where the most critical vulnerabilities are.
Thank you. My time has expired.
Mr. Ashford?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd also like to second the comments regarding Chairman Wilson and Ranking Member Langevin for their leadership on emerging threats. It's been a very interesting year and a half. I have two topics just I'd like to cover. One is deterrence in the cyber world, and then secondarily, the Information Technology Exchange Program and how you see that evolving. If I can start with General McLaughlin on deterrence. When we're dealing with what the public generally thinks about in the deterrence area, we're talking about nuclear weapons. In this case, we're dealing with cyber. We know to a certain extent how many nuclear weapons are out there. We can identify specifically the threat, and we have decades of experience in dealing with deterrence as it relates to nuclear weapons and other matters regarding deterrence. In cyber, where we have 80,000 or so attacks a year, and it's hard to identify where they're coming from and who has the capabilities at any given time. It's very dynamic, and you've talked about that. Could you just kind of define for me what deterrence means in the cyber world and how that is evolving? Or, Mr. Akin.
I'll go ahead and jump on that a little bit. So from a cyber perspective, as we mentioned before, cyber response, a cyber attack doesn't always mean a cyber response. Attribution is key, and that's probably the greatest challenge in any cyber attack, is attributing it to either a state actor or non-state actor. We look at it as we want to make sure that from a deterrence policy, it's declaratory, that everybody understands exactly where we stand, and that we're able to impose cost. So the first part of any deterrence policy, and our deterrence policy, is denial. We want to make sure we deny the adversary the opportunity to achieve the effects they're trying to achieve, and that's by developing and having good cybersecurity. The next piece we want to be able to do is have a very resilient system, and so we want to build the systems to be resilient, and if they are attacked, as General McLaughlin's already said, we can't protect everything all the time, but if they are attacked, that they will be able to be recovered and be resilient and back online, again, denying the adversary the goals they're trying to achieve. And then the third step of our deterrence policy is to impose cost, and that cost, whether it's diplomatic, law enforcement, economic, sanctions, or military actions, to include cyber response, those are part of the deterrence policy that we would use to respond or to signal to a state or non-state actor.
General.
Sir, just in accordance with the direction we received from OSD, even in Mr. Akin mentioned the Secretary signed our new DoD cyber strategy. Within that was direction for us to actually take steps to meet those three goals. And our primary effort has really been all the defensive activity and work we do to make our networks more resilient and to make it to where an adversary couldn't achieve their goals against our that they might try to achieve by attacking our cyber infrastructure. Many people don't think deterrence involves that, but it's really been the anchor of what we are doing, that we've been ordered to do, and we're accomplishing within Cyber Command. The imposed cost piece is just part of that force we have is aimed at bringing options to bear that would be there for the Secretary and the President if that was directed.
Thank you. Could I just ask a question about the Information Technology Exchange Program? I think I believe in the NDAA we expanded that program a bit and added more slots. Is that program? So take for example the Sony case where there were issues in the Sony technology that made it easier or less difficult to attack the Sony technology, whether it's the silos of their various businesses within Sony or whatever it is. So there are issues in the private sector that are different from in DoD sector and federal sector, and they're diverse. It depends on the industry. It depends on what they do. So is the purpose of the Information Technology Exchange Program to help to put in place people into the private sector directly to help them with that, and then vice versa to deal with those threats, and then vice versa to, if there's somebody in the private, as I understand it, this is what this is. So if in the private sector we have someone who is really exemplary or proficient in a particular aspect of cybersecurity, that we can bring those people in on a temporary basis to address those issues that we see. Is that essentially what we're doing here, Mr. Akin?
Sir, I'll have to take that one for the record. I'm not as familiar with that program.
But, okay, aside from that program, then, are there other strategies that are in place to allow us to bring private experts in the private sector into the military on a temporary basis and vice versa? Is that part of what we're doing? Maybe I misunderstood the program.
Right. I'm not, as far as actually bringing somebody from the private sector in to being a member of the military, I'm not familiar with that program at this time. I know that the Secretary has talked about that as part of the Force of the Future, some of the changes. So I know that's something that he's beginning to talk about, and as we move forward. What I would say is that we try to leverage the skills from the private sector through our National Guard and Reserve forces, as we mentioned earlier, and leverage those skills that they gain in the private sector. And we also do things like the bug bounty, where we actually have hackers come in and take a look at our DoD systems and see if they can hack those systems. So there are different ways we're trying to leverage the private sector and the skills that the private sector has to improve our own cybersecurity.
Thank you, Mr. General.
Sir, if you're referring to the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, I think that's what you're referring to, that the Congress recently passed, and that has gone a long way towards helping the federal government share threat information with industry and vice versa. The two main benefits of that act are that it, first off, reduces the risk of any legal liability to any of those industry partners that we have when they share that information, and also decreases any economic or business advantage that might be gained through the act of sharing that type of information. So it's really knocking down a lot of those barriers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This would be a question for all of you. Do any of you believe that the Department of Defense should use equipment provided by Huawei or ZTE, each of whom have links to Chinese military and intelligence apparatus, and each of whom have links to sales, illegal sales to Iran in violation of U.S. sanctions?
Sir, I'm not as familiar with those technologies. Certainly, we would want to take those factors that you just highlighted into consideration if we were going to use anything like that. And those would probably be, the risk would have to be evaluated based on those threats on whether we would use those technologies.
So you're not familiar with either of those two Chinese
I've
providers?
heard of them, but I'm not a technical expert to
General
make a
McLaughlin?
good decision.
So, sir, I'll just say, so I have heard of the first company that you've mentioned, but what I'd say broadly is all the equipment that we use or field as part of our DoD mission, its heritage and the supply chain associated with that are something that's important that we assess based on the utility of that equipment. We assess what vendors are appropriate and which ones shouldn't be. So I'm not prepared to tell you because I just don't know what exclusions might be there for both of those companies broadly across the DoD. But I do know for our core capabilities, it's something that before we buy it, we buy that capability, its security, and it's our knowledge of its supply chain or go into the factors before we make a broader procurement.
General?
So really just piggybacking on what the two other gentlemen have said, supply chain vulnerabilities are absolutely real, and they should be considered anytime we're looking at any equipment that we might purchase on behalf of the DoD or the federal government.
But that was relation to DoD using it. What about a U.S. cleared contractor? Do you apply a different standard to them? What would you advise them if they were thinking about using equipment from one of those two Chinese firms?
Sir, I'm not, again, I'm not on the acquisition side, and I know that we work very closely on the acquisition side with the different contractors through the Defense Industrial Base and to ensure that their systems are secure. So we're always looking at the supply chain vulnerabilities and the risk, and so our advice to any of the contractors that support the Department of Defense or any of the interagency, I think we would recommend them to take a hard look at their supply chain vulnerabilities and to ensure that their information is secure and their operations are secure.
So I guess I'm hearing from y'all that you don't have a list of Chinese firms that you're concerned about right now. Or if you have a list, you're not familiar with it.
Sir, I'm not familiar with the list.
Do you know if you have a list?
I do not, no, sir. And we can take that for the record.
Yeah, General McLaughlin, do you know if y'all have a list of Chinese firms you're concerned about having access to your supply chain?
Yeah. Sir, I don't. I just, because it's all handled within our acquisition chain of command, you know, the folks that actually procure our equipment, which is outside what we do at U.S. Cyber Command.
If you could do what Mr. Atkins just said and take it for the record and let me know back, I would appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
You. Ms. McSally?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen. I'm not sure if you answered this. Sorry, I was at a Homeland Security classified briefing. But I do want to ask about Secretary of Defense announced we were doing cyber operations against ISIS just starting a few months ago. The caliphate was declared 2 years ago. I know probably the details would be more in a classified realm, but this is a very important domain, and this terrorist organization is using cyber in a way that we've never seen other terrorist organizations use it before. What took so long, and what was the decision-making process that is having almost 2 years go by before we're even thinking about fighting in this domain?
Man, that's a great question. I think the bottom line is that we probably started more than 2 months ago. I don't have the exact date and time that we began to conduct cyber operations against ISIS. We continued to respond to ISIS and both the use of the social media, the sharing of PII about military service members and their families, and so it wasn't always necessarily a cyber response to ISIS, but it certainly was a response to their cyber activities.
So I know there's always this tension. I mean, I was in the military between keeping comms up and running so that we can collect on it versus taking it out so they can't communicate. But you know, we've known cells in Raqqa that are directing training, that are directing operations, very specifically, you know, targeting against Americans in our way of life. Why isn't the internet shut down in Raqqa? Like, why did we not have cyber operations 2 years ago going against their command and control as part of our centers of gravity and using all elements of military power to take them down?
Yeah, and I know they'll get a little bit more into this in the closed hearing later today. But the fact is, we were going after their command and control systems. We may not have been using necessarily cyber activities to do that. There always is a balance between collecting information and shutting it down. And certainly, going after specific nodes to hamper and stop the use of the internet by ISIS is important, but we also have to respect the privileges and rights of citizens to have access to the internet as a whole and as a country. So it's a careful balance, even in Raqqa or Mosul or anywhere, on how we balance the need or the rights to have access to the internet versus the use of the internet illegally by folks like ISIL.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up for sure in the classified setting with a little more details. Second question is we were dealing with this. My last assignment was at Africa Command, just trying to deal with the functional commands and the geographic commands. Can somebody speak to, I don't know, General McLaughlin, how the relationship's working, and is there duplication of cyber capabilities at the geographic commands, and how does that work if you're conducting operations and the coordination with the geographic commands?
Yes, ma'am. I think it's working pretty well, and I don't see any duplication right now. And when later we'll give you some great details with regard to U.S. Central Command, but generally Each of those combatant commands has a cyber element within it that's at their headquarters level, and their job really is sort of understanding broadly what their command's trying to achieve in the domain. We have the forces that are actually both defensive and offensive forces that they're using. And so the practical way that it's working today, for example, in real world operations, is we have daily, whether it's targeting meetings or planning sessions, where the supported commander and our staffs and our teams are interacting routinely. Our job is to support them, and we deliver the effects on the targets they need at the time they need, but we bring with the capability.
Great, thanks. Last question is about the laws of armed conflict and some of the challenges that we've had in this domain in identifying what's an armed attack and what constitutes the ability to be able to respond and Article 5 and all that kind of stuff. So can we just have some comment on where we are on that and whether there's still some further definition that needs to happen related to the clear authorities that are needed to be able to operate in this domain?
I'd say specifically to your question on what defines an act of war, I think is what your question is regarding the cyber act. That has not been defined. We're still working towards that definition across the interagency. As far as an attack of significant consequence, which the DoD would respond to in the homeland, we don't necessarily have a clear definition that says this will always meet it, but we do evaluate it based on loss of life, physical property, economic impact, and our foreign policy. So there are some clear lines in the road which we would evaluate any specific cyber act or incident and how we'd respond to that.
Okay, great. And time's expired. Thank you.
Let me follow up on just a couple things. Mr. Akin, I understand the concept of proportionality as you are looking for any sort of military effects. But are you arguing that the citizens of Raqqa have some sort of inherent right to access the internet that y'all have to try to weigh?
What I'm trying to explain is that I think that when we start talking about taking out the internet, there are always challenges to how you do that and where you do it in space. So the internet service providers who provide that internet service to a region are much broader generally than just the adversary's single command and control node. And so how that effect occurs has greater impact than just against the adversary, and we have to weigh that in when we make all our decisions. And whether that's a kinetic or a cyber operation, those factors are always weighed in the impact to the civilian populace.
Okay. Well, I think I understand the concept of proportionality, as I say, throughout warfare. I just got concerned there for a second that there was some sort of inherent right to be on the internet that was a factor in y'all's decision making. I want to go back. I think both the generals mentioned the importance of speed of decision making. Mr. Smith asked earlier about NSC and when you've got to keep them informed and when you've got to get permission. There's been a fair amount written about the air campaign, and I quoted Secretary Work earlier, who said, just like we have an air campaign, I want to have a cyber campaign. Some of the things that have been written about the air campaign are that for some sorts of so we've got airplanes circling above Iraq or Syria. For some sort of attacks, then a certain level of command can make a decision, say it's okay to drop your bomb. Others have to go up to the CENTCOM. Others have to go up to Secretary of Defense. Some have to go to the President. Meanwhile, the planes, they're circling. And that one of the challenges to being more effective against ISIS is this multi-layered decision-making process which has slowed down or hindered the ability of our military to be as effective as they could be. Now, that's with bombs, an air campaign. I'm concerned, I guess, that we are developing the same sort of multi-layered bureaucracy decision-making process when it comes to cyber, which, and part of the challenge with the AIR campaign is by the time you get permission to do it, the target is gone. And I have personally talked to pilots that have had that happen. Now, when things are moving at the speed of light, if we go through this multi-layered decision process to push the button on a cyber response, then we are going to be hopelessly behind. So I guess if anybody can address where we are with this speed of bureaucracy matching the speed of the world, that would reassure me, I would like to hear it.
Yes, sir. What I'd say is in the area of hostilities, CYBERCOM has the authorities by which to operate and conduct cyber effects and make that decision at the CYBERCOM level. So they certainly have those authorities to do that, and I think they can talk more in greater detail in the closed session tonight or this afternoon on the specific authorities that they do have.
Okay, well, we'll talk more about it, but again, just drawing the analogy to the AIR campaign, I am not yet reassured. Mr. Akin, I want to follow up Mr. Lamborn's question about the NATO announcement last week. Does that NATO announcement indicate NATO has agreed that a cyber attack can trigger Article 5?
That is my understanding.
And so then the question for the NATO nations is going to be at what level of cyber attack would trigger Article 5, because there are at least media reports of a fair amount of constant cyber activity in some of the Baltic and Eastern European countries coming from the east.
Right. As far as I know, there has not been a determination made or decision made on what would constitute a cyber attack that would trigger Article 5, so I would have to take that one for the record.
Okay. And finally, the questions that Mrs. Gabbard was asking about defense of civil authorities and attack of significant consequence. Is one of the factors which would be considered in determining whether it's an attack of significant consequence, who the actor is, whether it's a state actor or not?
That could be a factor, but I wouldn't say it's one of the primary factors. The primary factors are loss of life, economic impact, how it may impact our foreign policy, and then physical property. So those are the four primary factors that we would evaluate from an attack of significant consequence, whether that's a state or non-state actor.
I guess the questions that come to my mind relate to, say, terrorism information we get. We may get information that a terrorist attack is in the works. We don't know exactly what the target will be. We don't know exactly what the consequence will be. And if you have to wait to see what the consequence is, then it's going to be too late, right?
Yes, right. I'd also say it's similar to a cyber threat. If you have an unknown, you have a known, I guess I'll back up. If you have the potential for a cyber attack, but you don't know where it's coming from, you don't know who's going to do it, you certainly would alert people to provide them an opportunity to maybe heighten their security, just like we do in the physical world with a terrorist threat where we're not sure exactly the when or where it will happen. I would say so it is similar, but we can't necessarily, if we don't know where it's coming from and who's going to do it and how it's going to happen, it's very hard to go in and then stop that from happening.
Yeah, no, I understand. I guess, and I realize you don't want to get into hypotheticals. My concern is we know where it's coming from. Country XYZ that has tremendous cyber capability is preparing to do something, and the question is whether we wait and let them do it or try to at least take defensive action to manage the consequence of it. And to me, that's where this gets very difficult. I understand, you know, if we know it's going to have significant loss of life, yeah, that's pretty easy. But if we see, and I guess I would say the difference is, we know ISIS is going to do whatever they can get away with. So they're going to use their full capability to kill as many people as they possibly can. We don't know that about some state actors who have tremendous cyber capability, and so waiting to see how much of their capability they will use and how that fits into this standard of attacks of significant consequence seems to me to be somewhat problematic.
I think we're talking past each other a little bit. One is how we respond to an attack, and when we respond under defense support of civil authorities, versus making sure we have a good cybersecurity posture to make sure that we're defended prior to an attack. So certainly we would not necessarily evaluate the potential before it happens. We would go ahead and provide defensive measures through DHS, with DHS, to help prevent an attack, and then we evaluate after an attack happens.
Yeah, I realize these terms get a little, okay, so we're going to way back and defend, but we're not going to take action to prevent the attack to begin with. And so the definition of offense and defense in this situation gets a little tricky. And I'm not trying to pin you down. I'm just trying to explore some of the complexities of these challenges.
Certainly a known threat coming from a known actor that we know is coming after the United States. I would say that we would certainly evaluate that, and those decisions would be made by the Secretary and the President on what kind of actions we would take to stop that from happening. And that would be on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you to all of our witnesses here. I'd like to go back to the training environment again. General McLaughlin, the House Armed Services Committee, as you know, fully funded the Persistent Training Environment Initiative, and I understand other committees did not provide full funding. So my question is, can you describe the persistent threat training environment and the impact of proposed cuts? And what stage is the concept in? Has it been fully approved by the Joint Staff?
Sir, if it's okay, I'll attempt to answer that question for you. So, as was indicated earlier, persistent training environment gives us a couple things that we don't currently have, like on the Joint Information Operation ranges. You know, we don't have the scale of the complexity to truly represent a realistic and relevant threat, the ones that we're truly trying to train to. So that's the big advantage that it gives us. And of course, as the name indicates, it's permanent. Right now, the initial capabilities document is under review. It should be signed within the next 1 to 2 weeks. And if that happens and the funding stays in line, we expect to have IOC by fiscal year 19.
Very good. Thank you. I know we've talked about this on some point, but General McLaughlin and General Moore, what role does the Cyber Threat Intelligence Integration Center established in 2015 play in support of cyber operational planning?
So in terms of cyber operational planning, it's in our day-to-day operations at U.S. Cyber Command, it's not playing a role in the planning side. It's mostly playing a role of collecting, integrating intelligence and information on what the threat is doing, and then at times providing information back out to all the rest of the government operations centers. But they are not playing any operational planning role in support of U.S. Cyber Command missions today.
Very good. Thank you. And General McLaughlin, let me ask, what lessons have been learned about the construct of the Cyber Mission Force over the last year? Is the force manned, trained, and equipped and postured correctly to address threats in their respective mission areas?
So I believe we've learned that it's manned and equipped properly and postured to respond. Some areas, though, we have learned, we think in this space, agility is really important, and we've found that in many cases we have task organized sub-elements of teams. Each of those teams is comprised of specific sets of skills, and we've learned that it is very effective to take sub-elements of certain teams and task organize them against a specific problem set or a threat, and leverage smaller, more agile elements of those teams, whether they be defensive or offensive teams, to provide you a more immediate and a more tailored mission capability. And so we initially didn't think about it that way, but we had some very innovative commanders that used that approach. We do that in other domains of warfare. We task organize, and it works really well in the cyber mission force. It's one example of what we've learned of a way we would employ it. The basic building blocks we think are sound, but at times how we might sort of tactically organize it for a specific dynamic problem, that task organization has proven to be a great agile way for us to think about how we employ it.
Very good. And going back to the concept area of the cyber guard exercise that we just had, if we have a large-scale cyber attack that leads to infrastructure damage and DOD is called in to assist, what organization within DOD will take the lead? And in this scenario, what will Northcom's role be, and how is DOD getting ready to assist after such an attack?
So Northcom would obviously, in the case of a defense support to civil authority, they would have the command and control responsibility. CYBERCOM would be in support of that. The force that would be responsible to respond would determine on what the specific request was from the interagency. So it could be road clearing, it could be helping transport something from one location to another, which would be a TRANSCOM responsibility. Road clearing was the Army Corps of Engineers. And if it's a cyber response where we need to help from a cyber perspective, it would be CYBERCOM.
Very good. Thank you. Could we, well, before my time is about to expire, in terms of, for the record, building out the training environment, what is still needed, and how can we be of assistance further?
So, sir, right now the main thing that is needed is the broad four elements of that persistent training environment. We have some parts of that, but we have one part. It's called the event management side of it, is where we actually plan the training, all the training events that would need to occur globally, assess the performance of each of the players that are being evaluated, where our OP4, our aggressor force, would reside. It's really all the things that make it training. That is one of the key things that the fiscal year 17 budget request is the first real year of commitment to that funding, is building the technical capability to manage all of that capacity. And so what you saw last week was really a manual way of doing that, not at scale. And so what we're trying to build is the foundational technical capability to do that routinely at scale, and to have the people there that actually provide that training. And that's what we want to get started on really seriously in fiscal year 17.
Good. Well, we look forward to continue supporting you in that effort, General, as you build that out. For me, it was time well spent going to see that exercise, and I'd encourage others to do the same. So thank you, and with that, I yield back.
Ms. Walorski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to follow up, Mr. Akin, on a question from Mr. Rogers' line of questioning about China. I understand that you're not involved with the acquisition side of the business, but from a cybersecurity perspective, how concerned are you about counterfeit parts entering into our systems, and what can we best defend? How can we best defend those threats?
Yeah, as mentioned, we constantly and consistently look at our cyber chain vulnerabilities and evaluate, working with our defense industrial base partners and other contractors that provide resources for the department on different vulnerabilities and how we would stop those vulnerabilities to make sure that the only equipment that comes into the supply chain is free of counterfeit or high-risk material.
Thank you. General McLaughlin, I want to direct this question to you, but I want to just give you a really quick background. I represent the great state of Indiana, where we have Muscatatuck Urban Training Center. This remarkable training facility includes its own fully functional power plant. At this training center, rotational units are able to participate in a number of real scenarios, but one of the most compelling is where the power grid there is hacked or taken offline in the exercise. As I consider the devastating consequences associated with that kind of attack to our grid, I'm interested if the department has the training resources necessary to adequately prepare for one of these scenarios. So to you, sir, you described the CyberGuard and CyberFlag exercises in your remarks earlier. Are you confident in your ability to fully stress your forces in a way that prepares them to respond and defend against any sort of contingency scenario? And then what are the gaps, the significant gaps in training, if there are any?
So, ma'am, I would say today I wouldn't be able to say that I'm confident that we're able to respond to all of those. You listed a broad range of potential contingencies. The reason the persistent training environment is so important, in fact, I'd love to learn more about the capability you just described in Indiana, but part of that persistent training environment is being able to replicate each of those unique classes of terrain. Industrial control systems are different than platforms like airplanes and tanks, and they're different than just networks. So part of what we will build are the high fidelity replications of each of those unique types of targets that we would need to defend against. We are building the ability for civil or other partners bring their own range emulations and connect into that environment. And then the people that want to actually do it have the place to sit down, plug into what looks to them to be their realistic replication of what they're trying to defend, and then do their job in a realistic scenario against hackers or attackers that are trying to do it. So today I would say we don't have the capacity at scale to cover that range. We have a concept. That's why we are proceeding with our program to actually do that. And it has the flexibility to accept the ability for other partners, non-DoD partners, to plug into that environment and do training. We're doing it manually today at CyberGuard, and I think you'll see us do that more at scale with more partners than just U.S. DoD participants.
I'd like to invite you, General, to come into Muscatatuck. It's in Indiana. Would love to share additional information with you about their capability and having those resources there with that fully functioning power plant, what they've been able to learn, the kind of activities they're running, and what it does, I think, for training for all of our forces. So I'd love to extend an invitation to you to come there and see it for yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And gentlemen, thank you for being here today to discuss what is really a turning point in our approach to offensive and defensive military policy. Being a member of the Judiciary Committee, specifically the IP Subcommittee, cyber and tech issues are at the forefront of my mind. And I'm encouraged to see that we're taking necessary steps to ensure that the U.S. maintains a comparative and competitive advantage in this arena. With Mr. Akin, with respect to, well, I'll ask this question first because it's related to to the previous question that my colleague, Ms. Jaworski, asked. With respect to the coordination with civil authorities, specifically at the state and municipal level, and in consideration of the fact that U.S. Army Cyber Command is moving to Fort Gordon, I've heard concerns about how this may put neighboring communities at risk. For example, if Fort Gordon is hit with a cyber attack, is it independent enough from the local energy grid that it does not down power to the entire region, affecting hospitals, schools, et cetera? And what can we do in Congress to help facilitate coordination with local authorities in the event that such an attack happens?
And sir,
I'm sorry, I meant to ask that question of General McLaughlin.
So, sir, I'm not aware right now of any element of the move that you mentioned a concern potentially with U.S. Army Cyber Command moving to Fort Gordon. The scenario you describe is not one that has been brought to my attention. So, but I'm not aware of any direct connection of that move to an increased threat or risk to the local community. We do step back and look broadly at the risk to all of our military installations. Many of them, for their critical power and infrastructure, are using commercially provided control systems for electricity, water, and power. but we haven't really seen any analysis that shows the location of military installations is driving a higher likelihood that an attack against them would have some unique impact on the local community. So I'm not saying that it wouldn't, I'm just not aware of any analysis.
Well, I've heard concerns about it from state and local officials, and I think it's an area that reassurance is due at the very least. So in terms of coordinating with state and local leaders, I think that would be something important for you to consider. And I thank you for that answer. Mr. Akin, with respect to the development of cyber-related technology, much has been said of the need for DoD to attract brilliant hacker minds from the private sector. How can we in Congress help improve the DoD's ability to attract tech startups who are leading the way in cutting-edge technology?
Thank you, sir, for that question. I would say the first stop would be something that you've already provided, which is accepted service opportunities for the civilian sector or the civilian personnel in the department involved in cyber activities. But I say the broader we can make this accepted service across the entire cyber enterprise, that would be very helpful. So broadening out the accepted service for civilian employees would be helpful to be able to bring in those really smart hackers and other people that have a cyber background.
I've even heard some suggestions about creating startup incubators within specific government agencies. Do you see that as something that can be coordinated within DoD?
Sir, I'm not familiar with the incubator model. I know that we reach out through our Defense Innovation Unit experimental out on the West Coast and how we work with Silicon Valley and others. I know that we leverage the skill sets of our Reserve and National Guard force to make sure that those are the young, smart minds that are working in the private sector and bringing expertise back into the department through their Reserve and National Guard status. So I know we're going that route, but I'm not as familiar with the incubator model that you described.
Either one of you, General Moore or General McLaughlin, care to comment about that?
One of the brother systems, if you will, or programs to the DIUX that Secretary Akin mentioned is the InQtel model, which is actually started as a CIA organization, overt. Right now, there's about 8 governmental agencies or organizations that go through the InQtel model, specifically out in Silicon Valley. And you can think of it more as a venture capitalist type of organization where we bring problems that we want innovative and quick, hopefully, solutions to. That money is taken by the InQtel organization and invested in many times these startup organizations that have innovative technologies. We have started that program in the Department of Defense to help us solve another specific problem, and I see that program continuing to grow. It showed a lot of promise.
Thanks. Sir, one other, our Defense Digital Service recently ran a bug bounty using a hacker program basically to contract out for hackers to come in and take a look at DoD systems and to see if they could hack into it. So that was another model by which we did reach out to the private sector and leverage the skill sets they have to improve our own cybersecurity.
Thank you, and thank you for your service to the nation. And with that, I yield back.
Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we conclude, I think it's quite appropriate that Kevin Gates of the Emerging Threats Subcommittee is seated with the chairman. I really appreciate Kevin has a almost 20-year history of working on these issues before many of us had ever heard of them. So Chairman Thornberry, we are just fortunate to have such great people who are assisting our country protecting American families. General Moore, what legal or policy framework governs information conflict of the sort evolving from the use of social media for propaganda and recruitment? As a tactical matter, how successful are efforts to counteract the use of social media?
Yes, sir. So as I think you're keenly aware, A lot of what we're doing to counter ISIL in Iraq and Syria revolves around using cyber as a conduit for military information support operations, or MISO PSYOP operations, to specifically get after those types of problems. We have the authorities to conduct those types of operations, and I don't see any limitations at this time.
And indeed, sadly, we saw with the San Bernardino mass murder, with the Orlando mass murder, there was a direct social media contact and availability that has resulted in mass murder across our country. Secretary Akin, I was grateful in a deterrence policy you mentioned multiple responses that are possible. And that can't be more important than right now, because we've had so many incidents of cyber attacks just in the last month. The Democratic National Committee came under cyber attack. There were North Korean attackers of smartphones of South Korean officials. There were power outages affecting tens of thousands of people in western Ukraine. Over and over again, just incidents that are incredible. And then one that got my attention at the very time that the dangerous Iranian nuclear deal was being put together. In November 2015, Iran's Revolutionary Guard hacked the email and social media accounts of a number of Obama administration officials in an attack. Was there any response to that attack?
I'm not familiar exactly with the event and what our exact response was of all those situations that you described. But what I would say is, when we are able to have attribution, that we would respond at a time and manner and place of our choosing.
Well, it's so obvious. It was in such bad faith. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard would, at a time of negotiations or implementation, show such bad faith as to attack the Obama administration that was placing such faith in them. But we certainly want to be working with you, and there just has to be multiple responses that make sense. And I want to thank you all for being here, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Akin, Mr. Wilson prompts me to try one more question. Okay, primary job of CYBERCOM is to defend DoD networks, but in thinking about defense support to civil authorities, if there is a foreign country that launches some sort of cyber espionage or cyber attack against a server, a private server by the Secretary of State, or looking for information about a leading candidate for president, is that an attack of significant consequence? It's not against DoD networks, but it goes to either government officials or someone who's wanting to be a government official.
Yes, sir. So we would evaluate each attack, if we were evaluating based on whether it was an attack of significant consequence on the loss of life, property damage, economic impact, and foreign policy. So I would say we would evaluate each of those attacks based on that factor, on whether and how we would respond.
Seems to me it's pretty tricky when you start into political campaigns. Say somebody is the nominee for president, if there are further sorts of espionage. I was just about to adjourn, and Mr. Franks walks in. Do you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, I do, but I'll be brief, sir. And I appreciate your forbearance, to say the least. I didn't mean to come in and, sometimes people, when they walk in the party, that's usually the situation for me. General McLaughlin, I'll be really brief here. In an open setting, the best you can, how is Cyber Command being employed to fight against the Islamic State?
So, sir, in this setting, and again, we will get into more detail with you in the closed session. Our organization and the teams, the tactical forces that are within U.S. Cyber Command, a subset of those have been allocated and directed to support operations against the Islamic State. We are operating in support of U.S. Central Command. It is a focused activity that's recurring and that it's a major element of what the command is focused on day to day. We have leaders within our organization who, subordinate leaders to Admiral Rogers, that it's their only job. And we're bringing every capability that we have in this area that are available to us, we're making available to that fight.
Are there any restrictions or that might be called rules of engagement or anything like that on how the command might be employed against the Islamic State? Any restrictions?
Well, sir, a bit earlier, one thing Mr. Akin described is within the area where we're actually conducting these operations, we have adequate authorities, the authorities we need to operate. Our operations in cyberspace are subject to the same, rules that every operation. So we're constrained by the law of armed conflict and other limitations, but they're really not any different for what we are doing as in any other domain. So within the operation, we feel like we have the authorities and the flexibility we need to support that particular operation.
Well, last question, Mr. Chairman. We know a little about the cyber doctrine and military structure of adversaries like Russia, China, and others. What is our understanding of those things related to actors like Syria, Iran, Israel, or Germany?
Well, sir, I would just say, in this setting, of what we know about the cyber aspirations of our potential adversaries, all I would say is we know that most of them have realized this is a tool available to them, as an instrument of power, and it's a tool they can use without a significant amount of investment. They can have a relatively small number of people or buy expertise. Our coalition partners, those countries that we partner with, we are partnering with each of them and many of them are on their own looking at building military cyber capability, and we partner with them closely. They visit. They are looking for advice from DoD in the United States, and to the degree they want to come see this, we routinely meet with them and talk with them about how we can help them be part of a broader group that can defend themselves and operate together in cyberspace.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my minute and 54 seconds. Thank you, sir.
I thank the gentleman. Thank you all for being here and for answering our questions. We'll look forward to seeing you later today. The hearing stands adjourned.